Going into the MBA program, my thought process was I want to understand operations and how to manage, it's an MBA in leadership, so it's
Yeah.
how to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought was I'm going to be this career woman that moves up the ladder and, ends up managing, because I think that's the picture that's painted for us. It's like career success
Yes.
looks like you managing people. It looks like
Yes.
you being frontline for the organization, calling the shots. That's what we're told career success looks like. Recently, I've just realized I'm not energized by that.
You're listening to the Driven Introvert Podcast, a faith-inspired space for purposeful introverts who are ready to step out with courage and pursue their big ideas. If you are an introvert who is tired of letting fear dictate what you do and how you do it, then this podcast is for you. I'm here to remind you that the life and work you've dreamed about is possible, and your unique personality is not a limitation to achieving it. I'm your host, Remy Roy, and I'm the co-founder of shepact.com. On this podcast, I'll feature introverts and others with unique perspectives on what it means to follow dreams, passionately build out ideas, and live a life that matters. Expect inspiring conversations, resources, reflections, and stories on faith, life, and work.
Welcome to the Driven Introvert Podcast. I'm your host, Remy Roy. In today's episode, I'm bringing you a conversation with Nellie Philius. Nellie is a writer. She has a deep passion for spiritual and personal development, and this is really evident in her writing and creative expression. In the year 2022, Nellie launched her faith-based blog called Pure Gold Notes. Here she uses honest storytelling to uplift women on their journey to embracing God's calling for their lives. Alongside her creative work, Nellie is a talent acquisition professional with an MBA in leadership. She is really passionate about implementing talent programs that strengthen career pathways for first-generation women of color like herself. We talk about climbing the corporate ladder or not. We talk about why it's crucial to step out and use your voice even when you're uncertain how it will be received. We discuss the power of empathy and why the experiences and challenges we have make us more attuned to the needs of people around us. We had a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to listen in. Let's go. Hi, Nellie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Remy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, me too. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I love your calm energy, Nellie.
Thank you.
I love that you're very insightful and inspiring, even in your writing, and I really love your expression of faith. I think it's powerful to see how our faith journey just lights up everything else we do, and gives us a deep appreciation for the gifts and the talents God has given us. So I think that's pretty cool. And I see that in you, and that's amazing.
Thank you.
All right. I want to start by talking about life after MBA. So you just finished your MBA in leadership a few months ago. Yeah. And I mean, I don't have an MBA. I have a master's, and it was a whole lot and a half. I think post-grad programs do that to you. But how have you been doing since then? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I finished in December. And at first, I might have told you this, as soon as I submitted my first assignment, I was like, okay, what's next, Nellie? And then I had to pause. I had to be like, okay, breathe, rest, reflect.
I love that.
So I think right after it, I really just spent some time like doing things that bring me life. So just spending time with family, friends, that kind of thing. And January, now that I'm rested and rejuvenated, I'm really focused on seriously reflecting on what's next. I think there are like so many directions I can take right now. So I'm really just trying to think about where am I most effective, what makes the most sense, where should I be throwing my energy at, my career, my writing, my relationships, like, what's next and where should I be investing time,
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. I mean, I think it's a very good space to be in, this point where there's this quote. I don't know if it's a quote that I heard sometime. And it's that sometimes you're in a space where you're locked out of your past, but you're not yet in your future.
Yeah.
And it can be a difficult place. It can be an exciting place. It can be a place of just a lot of revelation to figure out, okay, what is next for me? Like, I know where I'm coming from. And now how do I figure out, okay, where I'm going, what's next. And I was reading your blog, and you shared this blog about 20 things you're leaving behind in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that list, and number 7 really got to me, which is kind of like what you just mentioned now. You said rush into the next goal without celebrating the last one. And I'm like, rush into the next goal without celebrating the last one. That is so true. I think about a lot of us driven people do this. Like, we're just like, I want to go. Yeah, let's just go. What's the next thing? Let's just keep going. But you were saying, stop, appreciate, what you just went through, what just happened, celebrate it, figure out, reflect on it, take the lessons or whatever, and then you can figure out where you want to go next. So yeah, that's pretty insightful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think, I'm a first generation college student, now master's graduate. My parents are immigrated here. And so I think there is that pressure to always be building, always be moving forward, because you don't want to disappoint them.
That is true.
So yeah, as an adult, I think it's a new frame of mind I'm trying to adopt. Like, let's pause, practicing that pause and breathing between, the next thing. So yeah, and I'm glad you said what it actually said, because I couldn't remember what number 7 said.
That was it. I read it, and that really spoke to me, because I find myself doing the same thing, always wanting to what's the next thing, but slowing down long enough to just take a breather. I think it really, helps set you up for whatever, might be in the future. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I know that you're in this unique position that a lot of people might be in. You've just crossed a major milestone. You just finished your MBA, this big thing that you experienced, and now you're looking to the future. And I don't know, maybe for you, it's equal parts excitement and maybe caution, or maybe uncertainty, or whatever that might be. How do you see the future from here? Like, realistically, when you think about the future, what comes to mind?
Yeah. Realistically, I think it's exciting, because I feel like my whole life, even though there are challenges and down seasons, each season ended up turning around, and I was like, okay, I get it. I get why that happened. And so I think there is this faith that future is bright. But I think with having so many options, sometimes I psych myself out a little bit. Like, is this the right move? Is that the right move? What should I be doing, God? Just tell me, because I don't want to mess up. And
I know.
So I think realistically, I'm excited about the future, but, as the person that wants to do all things well and, make myself proud, make my family proud, there's still that, what move is going to make the most sense? And, I think it's also just not wanting to mess up as a perfectionist or recovering perfectionist. So realistically, just trying to figure out what the next step is, and not reflecting and doing so much journaling and so much writing that I never take a move, in the first place. Because I think sometimes I'm thinking so much that I don't actually end up doing the thing. So trying to figure out, okay, what's now? Where do I want to be? What's just that first step I need to take to start moving towards that? So I think that's where I'm at, just figuring it out, but not so much to the point where I'm not making any moves.
I love that. Oh, there's so many things you've mentioned that just brings to mind some of the things some conversations that I've had in the recent past. I remember I was talking to one of my coaches, because I felt like I really needed somebody to help me get out of my own head when we were starting Sheep Act. And I was trying to figure out, okay, is this the right move? Am I doing the right thing? Exactly what you just, explained. And I feel like a lot of times we are in that space, and like you said, we can do so much thinking and so much writing and so much journaling and so much, contemplating, that we talk ourselves out of the thing, because we just spend so much time going around the mountain but never climbing it, And I remember in talking to my coach, she was telling me, I think she was just listening to all of my fears and everything. And she said, I wonder what your theology about God is. Like, do you think it's possible for you to miss God? Do you think it's possible for you to make the wrong decision and then you're lost forever? Like, it's just gone. Like, you just don't get it, And I'm like, oh my God, have I been seeing God like that? Like, he has this thing for me, and if I miss it, then it's over. And she's like, no, that's not true. Even if you miss it, God will find you. Even if you make a wrong turn, you take the wrong turn, you make a wrong decision, he will find you. Like, just stay connected. So sometimes we have to take those steps. Like you said, what is the next best thing that I can just do right now? And with time, it'll all come together. I love that thought. Thank you for sharing that. A few weeks ago, we were having a conversation, you and I, and you said something to me that really piqued my interest. You mentioned the fact that you're not entirely sure that you want to climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
I think that's a very unique train of thought. I want us to talk about that because I think it's important because a lot of women will find themselves in this position. Like, I like the challenge of my job, but I don't want to become a manager, a director, or whatever. I don't want to do that. I want to be an individual contributor, so to speak. I just want to do the work. I love it. I'm able to do it well. And I just want to stay there. Like, tell me about that thought. Tell me where you think that stems from, and just let's talk about that.
Yeah. I really, going into the MBA program, my thought process was I want to understand operations and how to manage, it's an MBA in leadership, so it's how to lead. And so my thought was, I'm going to be this career woman that moves up the ladder and, ends up managing, because I think that's the picture that's painted for us. It's like career success looks like you managing people. It looks like you being frontline for the organization.
Making decisions,
making decisions, calling the shots. That's what we're told career success looks like. And I think recently I've just realized that I'm not energized by that. I've always known I was an introvert, but really coming to terms and accepting that what that means for me, which is that I'm not energized having, conversations all day long, having to delegate even, like it takes a lot out of me. And I'm really somebody that I feel like I do my best work when I have blocks of time just to brainstorm, to create, to think about how to innovate. And so I think that's where I've started to think about the pros and cons of being a manager versus an individual contributor. I think with a manager too, you just get more visibility in the company. So more earning potential naturally. But it's also a lot of responsibility. You're mentoring, you're, in a sense, guiding somebody else's career. And I'm like, I don't think that's life-giving for me. And so I'm not 100% sure yet, but I know that the individual contributor path and just being able to be an expert in my field sounds very enticing, because it would give me time to just work on projects and be creative. That said, and I guess to add to that a little bit, like, I'm learning that you don't necessarily have to be a manager to be a leader. Like, you can lead. Leadership is less about delegating and operations and more about your ability to inspire and move people to action. So I think I'm still wrestling a little bit in myself on what makes the most sense for me long term. Like, could I be happy managing a team of 10 people, or would I just hate going to work every day doing that kind of work?
That's a deep one. I think it's somewhere where I definitely was there. I thought about it hard. Like, what do I want to do? Do I really want to do this? But then I made my decision, right? And I know you're going to make whatever decision that really works for you, and having, just God direct your steps so that you take the right step. But one thing I had to also grapple with was the fact that, will I get to the point where a few years down the line, I feel like my career has taken a sort of I feel stuck? Because there will get to a point, wherever company or wherever organization you work for, where you can't go beyond that point except you climb the ladder, so to speak. So the question I had to ask myself was, okay, what happens then? What do I do then? And I'm sure this is something you're probably just thinking about. And I'm glad, and I know you're thinking about it because I know you're very insightful that way. But I think it's important to look at situations from every angle so that you're not blindsided. Because it's possible for one to go ahead and say, hey, I don't want to do this. Okay, fine. I've settled into this decision. But
Yeah.
then down the line, you're like, oh, I never expected all of these other things, all of these feelings, or all of these challenges because of the decision that I made, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think about that? Like, what happens
Yeah.
if you do get to the point where you're like, oh, I can go beyond this point? Am I gonna just, move companies? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point because I
Mm,
think companies are just, I work in talent acquisition. So
mm,
even in my role, like, and while we're workforce planning the workforce out,
mm-hmm.
companies are just starting to figure out what are the career paths for an employee that
Yeah.
wants to be a manager
Mm-hmm.
versus just wants to move up and be promoted as
Mm-hmm.
an individual
Mm-hmm.
contributor. Um, but I think, in terms of what you were saying about getting stuck,
Yeah.
that's definitely a question that you have to think about.
Mm,
Like, if I'm an individual contributor, I think that also means you have to bring something really different to the table and
mm-hmm.
really be an expert in whatever
Yeah.
area that is.
True.
So, what subject naturally comes to you that
Mm.
other people don't necessarily get it off rip,
Mm.
but it's just easy for you to talk about it?
Yeah.
Um, and again, like, what subject is life giving where you actually care enough to fight,
Mm.
um, to grow in that field, to push
Yeah.
boundaries so that you are
Mm-hmm.
separated and not just seen as somebody that can only do one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, yeah, I think having that passion is super important and
Yeah.
understanding, is my passion people, which, not that
Mm-hmm.
my passion isn't people,
Yeah, I
but,
get what you mean.
or is my passion creating something,
Mm-hmm.
by myself, or partnering
Yeah.
with other people, just not necessarily in a management role.
I love that. I love these conversations because I think this is what happens when you are growing and stretching, coming into your own. And I feel like everyone has to have these conversations, with other people in your head. However, you just have to have that conversation because that's what happens when you are living intentionally. You're not just drifting from day to day. You're not just drifting
Yeah.
from job to job. You're not just drifting from year to year. You're trying to be intentional. What are the gifts that God has given me, and how can I channel those gifts? And I encourage everyone listening to really take that conversation seriously, because I know that it's very easy for a lot of people, or anyone, any one of us, to just coast because we feel like it's too hard. What am I chasing? What am I doing? Like, why am I thinking so hard about, just take life easy? Yeah, we do, but we also have to be intentional because we don't
Yeah.
want to be those people that waste our talents, waste the resources that God has given us. So I love these conversations. And I know that sometimes it's difficult to come to a very clear decision, at a certain time. And I know that you will figure it out. I'm also kind of like just figuring it out. And I know that a lot of people listening will resonate with that, yeah, I'm trying to figure it out too. I love that. So we'll continue talking about that, but let's back up a little bit. I know from your recent ShePack feature that
Mhm.
and I should probably talk a little bit about the feature here. So for anyone listening, if you're curious what I'm talking about, at Sheep Act, we just started to do this series where we share stories of women in the community, and just women in just this demographic of young women trying to figure out, okay, where are we going, what are we doing. I think that a lot of times we have experiences and our journeys that we haven't shared. Nobody knows, we just went through it. Maybe we took the lessons, maybe we didn't, but I think it's good to share our stories because other women feel less alone. They recognize
Yeah.
that, oh, I have also been there. I know what that feels like, and it inspires them. So Nellie was very gracious to share her story with us on the ShePack feature. And if you're curious about that, you can check it out at shepack.com/Nellie. Nellie is Nellie. And yeah, you can read the feature there. I'm going to leave a link to that in the show notes also. So Nellie, from that feature that you shared with us, you talked about as a student, you were an overachiever. You loved
Mhm.
academics, you wanted to excel, and you did, But I'm curious, how did you envision your future as it pertains to work? Like, what did you see yourself doing as a young woman while you were going through school, and when you would think about the future, what came to you?
Yeah, honestly, when I was a kid, the first profession or job that I thought I wanted was to be a teacher. Um,
Wow.
Third grade, my third grade teacher, she was incredible. To this day, my favorite teacher ever. And I
Mm,
think it was because she just like saw me and she recognized that I was
mm,
naturally like quick on my feet and smart and able to really excel in the classroom. And I
mm,
think just having somebody see me in that space meant a lot
mm.
to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think I processed it necessarily as a kid, but as an adult, I see that to this day, I love to catch the people in the corner that are like a little shy or
Mm.
a little more reserved,
Yes.
and really help people to like, I see you, I see what you're
Oh, I
doing.
love that.
um, and so the first thing I wanted to do as a kid was be a teacher. I tried it out in the classroom after college, and it wasn't a good fit.
Okay.
But I wanted to work with adults, but I still want to teach. Like I still
Mm,
want to, even with my writing, just like creating a space for people to learn from my
mm-hmm.
experiences or learn from
Yeah.
the insights I'm pulling from the lessons I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning. So teaching is definitely
A huge
something
part
that
of,
I
yeah.
think, I still think it's leading whatever
Mm,
work that I'm doing.
mm. I love that.
Yeah.
So, what was your first job out of college?
Hi, friend. Are you enjoying the podcast? May I ask you a favor? Please take a moment to leave a review of the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews are very important and help other people find the Driven Introvert podcast. I'd really appreciate if you could rate the show and also leave a written review. You can review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah, my first job, I was a teaching assistant in a third
Mm,
grade classroom.
mm,
I had no idea what I wanted to do after college. So I was
mm,
like, okay, I've worked in daycares before. I did a little bit of children's ministry at church as a
mm-hmm,
teenager. Let me just do what's familiar.
mm,
So I worked there, I got into the classroom, and I realized I just wasn't equipped to
mm,
handle the different needs of my students, of
mm.
their behavioral needs, mental needs.
Yeah.
Teachers do it all.
Yes, they do.
Their parents, their therapists, counselors,
Mm,
and it was emotionally, I don't think I had the capacity for it.
mm.
So 7 months in, I was just like, all
I'm
right,
done.
that's enough. I know, like there was a little bit of shame around it because I'm like,
I
okay, this is
know.
my first job, and I didn't
Hmm.
even finish the school year.
Hmm.
Um, but I just had to recognize that it wasn't for me. I wasn't
Hmm.
meant to teach in that capacity.
I see. I
And there are
see.
other ways that that can look.
Yeah. So I know you said you didn't know what you wanted to do right out of college, but did you have a view or expectation of work, like what it should look
Yeah.
like or feel like? And has that changed over time?
Yeah. I think growing up, or more so as a young adult,
Mm.
I thought that your career had to be directly linked to like your purpose. Um,
Mm.
and it can be,
Yeah.
but I think I thought that all of me should
Hmm.
be invested into my job or my 9 to 5.
I see.
Um, And now that I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, your job is how you make your money, it's how you live. You should like it. If you're working
Mm-hmm.
somewhere that you hate, you should probably leave. If you're working somewhere where it's mentally taxing, it's probably not for you. But I can also have hobbies and endeavors, and serve outside of my job and
Mm-hmm.
still live like a purposeful, meaningful life.
Mm.
Um, so I think the switch for me has been being able to separate career from like your God given purpose, um, and figuring out, okay, if my career isn't necessarily my purpose, that just means I
Mm.
need to be way more intentional outside of those hours,
Mm.
to make sure that I'm doing all the things that are on my heart to do.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I think now that you mentioned that, I've probably also had that mindset that your job has to be your passion, it has to be your purpose. And I think it takes time sometimes to figure out that maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
you can maximize your time outside of work and really be intentional about trying out your gifts, your skills, see what fits, see what you really want to dive into, see how you can make a difference and an impact in the world, and your job can just be like you said, yes, something that hopefully you enjoy, hopefully challenges you, not drains you, but just, pays your bills because that's important,
Yeah.
and then you can figure out how to do, everything else, and
Yeah.
it's a powerful realization to come to. You said something on that list where you talked about things that you wanted to leave behind in 2023. You mentioned, look, is it looking forward to the weekend or waiting for the weekends? Is that
Waiting for the
connect?
weekend.
Yeah, is that connected to trying to figure out what to do with your purpose and passion? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, when I first wrote it, my thought there was I tend to wait for the weekends to like have fun, like to go out
Oh,
with
I
friends,
see. Oh, I
to
see.
just do things
Mm-hmm.
that make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're having the conversation, that could absolutely be an interpretation of that.
Yeah.
Like don't wait for the weekend to like invest in, the gifts that God's given you. Like don't wait
Mm-hmm.
till the weekend
Mm-hmm.
to do those hobbies or pursue those passions that
Mm-hmm.
really help you to feel like you're alive and you're doing
Yeah.
something important with your life. So,
Yeah.
hey, Remy, maybe that is the interpretation that I had in mind. I don't know,
I
possibly.
know, because it just came to my mind, and I thought, I remember reading that, and I was trying to process it. Like, what does it mean to me to not wait for the weekend? Like,
Yeah,
what does it mean to me to not push the things that I really want to do, I'm excited about doing, I'm passionate about doing, to a certain time, because yeah, that's the only time that I can do this. But yeah, I mean, pulling back now, I think it's something to think about, because a lot of people will find themselves having like, oh, I have this job. Maybe I enjoy it, maybe I don't. But there are other things that I want to do. How can I marry those two things? How can I make sure that
yeah,
I'm working, but I'm also pursuing, my purpose? And I think what it means to be driven sometimes is, are you able to do those two things? Are you able to figure it out? You may not find, we talk about balance a lot, but it's not easy to kind of like
yeah,
find an equilibrium all the time. But are you able to just figure out a way to do it? A way
yeah,
to still think about your purpose and passion while also working your 9 to 5 job, you know?
yeah. And I think that's another, shift in how I think about work. I used to
Mm,
think, okay, because this is supposed to be connected to my purpose, it's all consuming and I have to
mm,
throw everything that I have to this job.
yeah,
Um, and I'm not against 9 to 5s. I'm not against
absolutely.
entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
But your energy, where you're investing your time, where
Mm-hmm.
you're giving your emotions to,
Mm-hmm.
like where you're giving your best creative thoughts to, that
Mm-hmm.
matters. And it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily belong to your 9 to 5 because that's somebody else's dream that they planted and
Yeah.
made happen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't want to give all of myself to this place just because this is where my livelihood comes from. Like there's so much more. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much more for us to do outside of work, and the balance isn't easy, especially with families and
Yes. Yes.
all the other things that come with life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, stewarding your time and your investments is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also just a rounded view of what does it mean to grow personally and professionally. Like,
Mm,
it's possible to only give your mental energies to your professional life, and you
yeah,
realize that you haven't done a lot personally, like your mental energy, your spiritual life, your family, your relationships, your friendships. Like, are we living a rounded life, or just pouring, like you said, 100% of our energies into work? And we can even do the same thing for passion. Our passion project, we can throw everything into it because we're so focused on succeeding, whatever success means to us, that everything else is out of whack and out of balance.
yeah,
And trying to figure out that equilibrium, it's not always easy, but it's something we have to strive for. I think that's pretty insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
All right, tell me about 15-year-old Nelly. I know you've mentioned some things here about the ideas that you had about work and all of that, but what kind of mindset did you have as a teenager? What kind of things excited you, challenged you? Who was
yeah.
15-year-old Nelly like?
15-year-old Nellie, she was very reserved, still
Hmm.
reserved, very shy, a little less shy these days.
Yes.
um, in my studies, I was just focused on, I was the golden child, is what I think. I
Hmm.
did everything right,
Oh
or
my
everything
god.
that I should be doing.
Yes.
And I think my mindset at 15, I was probably sophomore at the time. It was
Mm-hmm.
just focused on college, like what can I do right now to get into a really good school?
Yeah.
Because I thought education was the one thing that opened up all the other doors in life.
Mm-hmm.
Which I still believe it does open a lot of doors, but it's
It
not
does.
everything.
Yes.
And yeah, so I was just focused on my books. I think 15-year-old Nellie was also a little like sad. I think I was a little insecure. Like I
Mm.
leaned on my book smarts, but it was
Mm.
still those areas where I was like insecure about my looks or insecure
Mm.
about how cool I was.
Mm.
I had like a few changes in my friendship circle at 15. And so that really took a toll on me too, in terms of
Mm.
like finding the place where I belong. So I think that was the challenge. It was like
Yeah.
understanding who I am
Mm.
and figuring that out.
Mm.
But what excited me, I would say, even though I had like challenges at 15, that was also a year I started dancing.
Mm.
Um, I started praise dancing, doing liturgical dance at my church,
No.
and it was a change of pace because
Mm.
I was reserved at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but now I'm like ministering in front of a
Yeah.
congregation.
Yeah.
Um, but that was, I think, the first time in my life where I really had the opportunity to express myself
Mm.
without words.
Mm.
Because speaking in front of people isn't necessarily my favorite thing to this
Yeah.
day, but
Yeah.
to express yourself in another art
Mm.
was so important. And the sisters that I gained
Mm.
from like meeting every week for rehearsals and
Mm.
ministering, like
Yeah.
there was nothing like it. So I think it was a lot of changes and a lot of trying to understand my why
Yeah.
and um, still wanting to like make everybody proud and make sure I'm doing the right
Yes.
thing to set myself
Yes.
up for future success. Um, but yeah, I'm proud of what she accomplished because I
Oh my
everything
God.
she did, I'm
Yes.
here now. So we made it, right?
I love it. I love it. Oh my God. Do you know, I feel like you're telling my story by just everything you mentioned there, because I was also very shy, very reserved, very into my books. I was like very focused, like I have to study, I have to get good grades. That was all it was all about. And I was also sad. I was
Yeah.
also just kind of, I was very, what's the word the kids used to use, emo? Like it was just,
I
I
got called
was,
that too.
oh my God, it was and I thinking back and I'm like, what, why was I so serious
Yeah.
and so into myself and always in my head? But that was just my experience. I was very insecure. I was very insecure about my looks. I was very insecure about everything. And just that journey, it makes me a little more, I think that's the good thing about when you go through challenges, you become
Hmm.
more empathetic.
Yes.
It gives you empathy in just a different way. When you see people, you know how you said you are the person who is always attuned to who's in the corner, who is maybe a little quiet, a little shy, a little reserved, but they have something, and you're like, I can see you. That's the way I feel too. Like I
Yeah.
am drawn to those people because I've been there. And I feel like I was there. I went through that so that I can be a blessing to them, so that I can support them in whatever way that they need to be supported, in the way that I was supported, by the people around me going through such a difficult time and trying to find
Yeah.
myself. Because it's such a difficult experience. The teenage years, it's already like crazy. Right. And then you add on top of that all those feelings of insecurities and all those fears. And it's a lot. And for
It
people
is.
who are raising teenagers who happen to be introverted or shy or reserved, I feel like it can go wrong very fast if you are not really attuned to what that child needs, what that young person really needs to thrive. You can push them too hard. It's possible to push them too hard because you feel like, oh, why don't you be more like every other person? Why don't you speak up? Why don't you do this? And that can make them even more, you know, afraid. It can make them
Yeah.
even more withdrawn. So finding that very delicate and helpful way to really nurture them, it's very important. I think about it and I'm like, God, if you give me a child who is like me, like I hope that I can do right by them and just figure out how to nurture them and help them, just find their path, because it's really hard, even as an adult, to go through those feelings, those times where you just have so much coming at you. In one of the episodes, and probably episode 4, I think I talked to Latrice. She actually used to be my director, one of the places that I worked. And the feelings that I experienced on that job, it was so intense. But she reached out to me, and she didn't even know what I was going through, right? But she reached out to me in a way that just gave me a lot of perspective. And I think doing that for people, whether they're young people, whether they're people in our circles, at our jobs, I feel like that's one of the reasons why God gives us just some challenges and some experiences to go through, because now you can see the person in front of you and be of help to them, and
Yeah.
bless them and speak life to them in such a way. And I know you've probably experienced that, people around you that I can just be a blessing to them even with your writing, and we're going to talk about that definitely. But yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
sharing that.
100%. I completely agree with all that you just said. Like, I don't think we go through things just to go through them and to move on to the next thing, but
Yes.
it's to help somebody else that's going to come through that after us. Um, so yeah, that was a great point, Remy.
Yeah, thank you. And when you talked about you started to dance at church, for me, that was writing for me. That
Mm,
creative expression was writing, because I remember I would sit in a classroom by myself when all the kids are like gone to play or whatever, and I would just write,
yeah,
and it gave me something to hold on to. And I like that you mentioned like dancing did that for you. I feel like everyone needs that thing, a way to
yes,
express yourself creatively that helps you feel grounded and find yourself. It's amazing. And let's talk about your writing. You are a fantastic writer, Nelly.
thank you.
I'm just so inspired by everything you write. And you have a blog called Pure Gold Notes. It's beautiful. I love your thoughts and your musings there. And I remember we had a conversation about this, and you envisioned your work there and the things that you really want to do. Are you comfortable sharing your visions out loud about, that
Yeah,
space? Yeah.
yeah. So I started Pure Gold Notes in 2022.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Pushing
Mm-hmm.
on 2 years. And it was really birthed out of some of what I've shared earlier, that I wanted to tell stories, share
Mm-hmm.
testimonies
Yeah.
that encourage people that have felt invisible, that have felt
Yes.
stagnant,
Mm-hmm.
to move forward, to break free from the lies that keep them stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's really the center of the blog. And so I share the things that I'm going through, the things that I'm learning. I always bring it back to God, because at the end of the day, He is literally the center of all of it. Like, everything, ought to point back to Him. And so when I think about my vision for the space, it's definitely supposed to be a platform built to encourage and empower women, Christian
Mm-hmm.
women, but also I can definitely see it growing into a community of writers, or a
Mm-hmm.
community of poets, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even dancers or artists, where they can
Yeah.
also tell their stories and it
Yes.
encourages somebody else. Um, so I think I'm just at the place where I'm trying to figure out again, like, what's next. Like, I want to fine tune my writing. I want
Mm-hmm.
to become a stronger writer,
Mm-hmm.
and use those resources that I have to make sure that I'm not also staying stuck, and I'm
Yeah.
finding new styles, and I'm embracing new ways to convey my ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the vision is definitely ultimately to be a space for other people to share creatively, because it's not just my testimony that
Yeah.
can impact somebody else. You might have a story that you tell, and it resonates with a different person, somebody that I'm not necessarily able to reach, because we
That's
have
true.
different experiences.
That's true.
um, so yeah, a space for healing, a space for freedom, for growing, for sharing, for being in community.
I absolutely love that. I do. When you think about all of those visions and the things that you want to do, and it's like a vision of the future in your head compared to where you are right now, how are you motivated to bridge that gap? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I am. So as a person, I'm naturally, I execute. I
Mm,
like plan. I bring,
mm-hmm.
like, I'm good at managing a project and
Yeah.
bringing an idea to life.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, when it comes to my ideas, all of a sudden I
This
get stuck.
happens. I know. I know.
um, yeah, so I am motivated to bridge the gap, because writing for and sharing my writing for the past few years has, not only has it blessed me to see how other people have been encouraged, but
Mm-hmm.
every now and then I go back to my own posts and I'm like, wow, like, if God did
Mm-hmm.
it then, Nelly, He's gonna do it again.
Yeah.
So I think bridging the gap for me really just looks like finding accountability.
Mm.
and
Mm.
community to make sure
Yes.
that I'm doing what I said I would do. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're by yourself or doing
Yes.
something by yourself, it's so
Mm-hmm.
easy to get discouraged
Mm-hmm.
or to find an excuse to postpone whatever you're trying to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm just trying to find like-minded people, like the Sheet Pact community,
Mm-hmm.
or even like growing in terms of fellowship at church and the people I'm
Mm-hmm.
connected to there to
Yeah.
really, be purpose pushers and push
Mm-hmm.
me to
Mm-hmm.
do the things that I have on my heart to do.
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned at CHIPAC, we actually have this community chat that we're doing right now. And I'm going to invite you to come, talk to us, in this chat one of these days. But we have them every month. And this month, February, we're in February right now, we're actually talking about consistency.
Oh,
And yeah,
wow.
and I think it's so powerful because you mentioned just finding accountability and just keep doing it, just keep
Yeah.
showing up. I think that's most important. Well, the lady who is going to chat with us on consistency this month, she has been writing for a long time, and I feel like we've been writing. I probably started writing a little bit earlier before she started, and I've stopped and started and stopped many times, and she has kept going, and she inspires me, because I think it's impossible for you to stay consistent and not improve. Like,
Hmm.
improvement is inevitable if you are consistent. If you keep doing it, you keep showing up, and that's where most of us fail.
Yeah.
We get tired, we lose interest, or maybe we are so focused on the outcome, and when the outcome doesn't look like what we expect, we drop off, the wagon, we give up, and that's certainly been my experience. So many things I wanted to do, so many dreams and ideas, but I kept falling off the wagon because I just wasn't resilient. I just, gave up too soon, So I love that you mentioned that, just taking that step, whatever that step is, to kind of help you bridge that gap and do the things that you're really excited about doing. And yeah, and just keep doing it. So I just want to encourage everyone listening. Yeah, that's a very good first step for you. What is the next best thing that you can do, and how can you stay consistent doing it? Because you keep doing it, you're going to get better, you're going to get better,
Yeah.
you're going to get more opportunities, you're going to get more ideas. The dots will begin to connect, and things that you never thought possible will happen just by showing up. So I hope that encourages somebody. All right, let's talk about introversion. I know that you're an introvert. Has it ever felt like, I remember I was having a conversation with somebody and I said, oh, because I'm an introvert. And she said, oh, that it's so amazing, the labels that we give ourselves. And I thought, I definitely understand the idea of seeing introversion as a label, but
Hmm.
people might disagree with this. But I look at it, I try to look at things from different angles, right? If introversion is a label, maybe it's a label that kind of helps you make sense of certain things. Why do we label things at home? Why do we label things, like you put something in a jar and you label it? Because it has a function and you want people to know that this is what it is and you can use it for the right thing. And if I gave you a bottle and I said, drink this, and you couldn't see a label or anything, you'd be like, nah, I'm not drinking that, right? So I feel like not all labels are bad. And it depends on how we let it affect us. A label can actually be empowering. For me, knowing that, because I didn't have language growing up for my personality, I just knew that I didn't have a lot of energy to play all day, spend time with all the kids or all the things. I love to be by myself, to recharge. I love to read books, be quiet. I didn't have a language for, why I was that way. But I was also kind of not really shamed, but I was, like, you need to come out of your shell, stop being so, all of that, So that affected me. Now that I
Hmm.
have language and I say, oh, I'm that way because I'm an introvert, it's not disempowering for me. It actually empowers me to know, oh, I'm this way because this is my personality. So knowing that, then I can figure out, okay, how can I thrive? How can I do this and that? I'm curious, has being an introvert ever felt like a label that limits you? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I definitely think a label doesn't need to be a bad thing, but it's like how we define it and what are the
Mm,
connotations that we're
mm,
sort of adding to it.
yeah.
And so growing up, I was definitely the quiet kid, and I didn't know the word introversion. I
Yes.
was called shy,
Mm-hmm.
and people would be like, "Why are you so quiet?" And I wouldn't respond, but in my heart, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Why are you so loud?" And
I love that.
um, but as an adult, now that I, like you were saying, have the language for it, I understand that I'm getting moody because I've been talking for too long. I've
Mm-hmm.
been on for too long, and
Mm-hmm.
I just need to take time to process. As a person, that was called shy growing up and was
Mm,
shy growing up, it
mm,
felt like a limitation, and I felt
mm-hmm.
like I had to change,
Yeah.
um, and even fake it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to get into the spaces that I needed to get into.
Mm,
But I'm now realizing like you can be an introvert and still have charm and still
mm-hmm.
move people and still
Absolutely.
lead.
Absolutely.
I every job I've had is because I did well in the interview. So like it's not
I
limiting
love
me.
that. Yeah.
It's just helping me to understand how I work best and
Mm,
what I need to like operate and be sharp and
yeah.
and connect with people in a way that makes sense. So not a limitation, but definitely felt like one growing up when I didn't have the language
Mm-hmm.
or necessarily understood why I would be so drained. When I was in these spaces where I was having to be on at all
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. I love that. I love that these days there is more awareness, around personalities, and people don't necessarily have to feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me, because I definitely felt like there was something wrong with me. Why can't I do this and do that and do that? But now I know why. I know why. I'm fine with the why. I just need to figure out, okay, how can I best show up as myself? And how can I
Yeah,
make sure that the things that felt like a limitation in the past doesn't hold me back from doing the things that I really want to do. Not everything will call to my heart. Not everything will be something I want to pursue, but the things that I really do want to pursue, I'm not going to let my being reserved or maybe being more quiet or whatever stop me from going after it. That's really what it means to live
yeah,
a full and fulfilling life. Like, are you doing the things that you really want to do in a way that empowers you? And
yeah.
like you said, it's crucial. It's to kind of see life that way. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And that's so good because I think it only becomes a problem if now you being reserved is preventing you from the
Yes,
opportunities or you're not doing
absolutely.
the things you want to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very like important, thing to distinguish is like, am
Yes.
I introverted
Mm-hmm.
or do I have anxiety or am I fearful or,
Yes.
do I have an insecurity that's preventing me from like moving forward?
Yeah, that's true, because not all introverts are shy. One, not
Yes.
all, not all
Yes.
introverts are reserved. Not all introverts have social anxiety. It's not Social
Yes.
anxiety is not a personality type. It's a
Hmm.
condition. Like, it's a different thing. And I've definitely experienced social anxiety. And I am an introvert who is also shy, but then there are introverts who are not shy. So I think not seen as this huge thing that just makes, oh, you're an introvert, then you must be this. We are so varied and different, and we really have to understand ourselves. And which is why I love the personality tests, because I know some people don't like them, but I do, because I think it just kind of gives you language. It just kind of helps you
Yes.
understand, oh, okay, this is the reason why. And then you can figure out, okay, how can I best show up in the world? And yeah, that's amazing. All right. So let's talk about what you do on a daily, weekly basis. Like, is there a particular thing, as an introvert, as somebody who has just finished a major, postgraduate program, as somebody who's looking to the future, like all those things, what part of your daily or maybe weekly routine is really giving you peace and joy right now? Something you
Mm,
just enjoy doing on a daily or weekly
yeah.
basis?
Yeah, on a daily basis, I've really been into listening or watching podcasts like
Yes.
in the background as I'm
Uh-huh.
working.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few that I have in rotation right now. But I think just being able to like learn something new, like
Yes.
that again isn't necessarily related to my job, but is
Mm-hmm.
related to my personal development.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something I enjoy doing. And you just
Yeah.
feel a little bit smarter afterwards, like, wow, like I
I
just pulled some
know.
more
I learned
some more
something.
information. So I would say podcasts for sure.
Which ones are you
I'm
loving right
also
now?
I love With the Perrys. I've been
Mm-hmm.
watching In Totality. It's a newer podcast.
Oh,
So both are more well. With the Perrys is more focused on like that spiritual growth.
yes. Mm-hmm.
In Totality is a little bit of that, but also I would say more personal development. But
That's
those are my two in
awesome.
rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I love podcasts, and I think it's just an amazing way to share information, to learn, and yeah, to definitely grow personally. So that's awesome. What's your big idea, Nelly? I know that you're working on your blog right now. What is a big idea that you're trying to pursue right now, and that you're just excited about doing in this season?
Yeah. Big idea. Let me think. That's a good question, Remy.
Yeah.
I think my big idea is getting more comfortable with speaking more.
Hmm. Yeah.
So part of why I started writing was because that's how I best expressed myself. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I could organize my thoughts and say
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I wanted to say, how I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to say it. Because like
Yes.
words matter and words, you remember the words spoken to you. So I
Absolutely.
like to be specific about those. But I think there is a power in like using your actual voice.
Mm.
So whether that is like recording something that I've written or just
Yeah.
sharing a quick message on social
Mm-hmm.
media, I have some things in the works on how I'd like to do that. So thinking through that, but really just allowing myself to like be seen. There's sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that fear of letting people see you, letting them see
Yeah.
you try.
Yeah.
Um, so being okay with that and being okay with using my voice.
I love that. You know, something you just mentioned now reminds me of something I saw online. Being afraid to let people see you try. And the question the
Yeah.
person asked, I think on maybe YouTube or something, was, are you afraid to be seen trying? And I think if
Mm,
we think about it, a lot of us are, because when you're trying, you're vulnerable because you're not sure. When you're
yep.
trying, you are putting yourself out there. You're not certain how you're going to be received. And so it can feel like, a very just vulnerable space, and we don't like to feel that way. We want to feel like we have it put together, we know what we're doing, but we have to not be afraid for people to see us try. And I'm glad that you're doing that. I call myself a trier because I think it's
Mm,
just a good space to be in. Like, let go of the fear of having to get it perfect, having to know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. Just give it a shot. So yeah,
yeah.
thank you for just mentioning that, because I think it's something I want people to really take away from this. That's awesome. All right, how can people connect with you and follow your work and see what you're doing next?
Yeah, so I share on my blog, Pure Gold Notes. You can read the blog post at puregoldnotes.com. I'm also sharing some of that content on social media, particularly on Instagram at Pure Gold Notes. So those are the two places where you can, get in touch, read the content, and stay connected.
All right. Thank you so much, Nellie, for this conversation. I totally enjoyed it. Everyone, please check out Nellie's blog. I will leave the link to everything in the show notes. Yeah, please support her work. And we're excited to have you on here. And hopefully, we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me, Remy. Like I've even just been learning from you, so this has been great. I'm like, I got to journal after this and unpack.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Driven Introvert podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to click the follow button on your podcast app or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As always, don't forget to take courage, trust God, and go pursue your big ideas. See you next time. The Driven Introvert podcast is produced by shepack.com and Remy Roy, with content, editing, and strategy expertise from Candice Zakaria and Aishat Olariwaju. Want to ask a question or share a comment on a future episode? Email us today at thedrivenintrovert@shepack.com or click on the link in the show notes to record your question in a voicemail.
Hey, friend, do you know your strengths? I know you want to live a fulfilling life, right? You want to feel like your life is your own and not like you're in the wrong movie acting the wrong part. But do you know your strengths? Are you operating from your strengths at work and in your calling? Or does everything feel hard and like a chore? I know what it feels like to not know where you belong. And for me, discovering my strengths and really taking steps to deploy them effectively has been very crucial to helping me feel more fulfilled and excited about life. If this resonates with you, if you'd like to find out more about your strengths, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Uncover Your Strengths Free Guide. In this guide, you'll find tools, tests, and resources to help you find your strengths. There'll be space in there to write down your discoveries. There'll be reflection questions to help you dig deeper, and prayers to help you seek the Lord for wisdom on how to move forward. I hope you lean into this. I hope you not only download this guide, but also use it, grow, and be empowered to pursue your next steps in faith, work, and life. You can get it today at shepacked.com/strengths. The link will also be in the show notes. That's shepacked.com/strengths.